I knew it had to end because if it didn't, it was going to kill me. Like it was going to literally kill me. And either I was going to get some sort of disease, alcohol related disease, or something worse would happen. I knew this couldn't last forever, but I was also, I had been trying to quit drinking for 15 years and nothing had stuck. And I decided to do something different.
Welcome to the Unspeakable podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. My guest this week has been on the pod many times. She is journalist and podcaster Katie Herzog. You know her, of course, as the co-host of Blocked and Reported. But this time, Katie is here to talk about something much more personal, definitely out of her lane. And that is her new book. It's called Drink Your Way Sober. It is the story of how years of heavy drinking, including a secret 2-year period during COVID, led her to an unconventional treatment called the Sinclair method. We talk about a lot of things in this conversation. We talk about myths and taboos around alcoholism, about why AA doesn't work for everyone, and how she finally got free of this mental burden, obsessive thoughts around drinking. We also touch on the podcasting world, my favorite topic, independent creation, which would drive anyone to drink, the state of Substack, what is going on in the heterodox space, the sense-making space, as the sense-making space stopped making sense. As always, it's a spectacular conversation. I always love talking with Katie, and I am so happy to bring you this conversation. So enjoy. Katie Herzog, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
We usually talk about culture war stuff, I guess, cover, we run the gamut between trans and gender and dogs, maybe. Trans and dogs is the spectrum of our conversation.
Real estate. Now, we also talk about real estate.
Okay, we can talk about that too. But the occasion for your appearance this time is your new book, Drink Your Way Sober. I'm holding it up in case anybody's watching on YouTube. And this is actually a very timely book because a lot of people are talking about sobriety these days. Apparently the young people don't drink at all or have sex, which is terrible.
Yeah.
So maybe somebody should write a book about how to drink for the youngsters.
And how to have sex.
So the population doesn't collapse. But for our purposes here, tell us the backstory just to get started, and then we'll dive in, as they say in podcast land.
Yeah. So the backstory is that I drank a lot from a young age. I started drinking I had my first drink when I was in middle school. I drank a lot in high school. I drank more in college. And then by the time I had graduated from college, I was really a barfly. Like I was one of those people who was at the bar at 4 p.m., sitting at the time it was a book. I would bring a book to the bar because people used to read, actual books and sit there and end up talking to old men, old alcoholics and bartenders. It was always kind of my favorite thing to do. Any city
it's a very fun thing to do.
Yeah. I don't know that people, like young people, actually do that anymore. Like anytime I've been to a bar in the last, 5 years, it's like people are on their phones, which the whole point of bringing a book, like you might want to read the book, but the real point is that so somebody will ask you about the book. That was my point. I always wanted a conversation.
I have a whole riff about this actually in my latest book, but we'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so you were young, you were cute, it was very charming. You
Not
sat
that
there,
cute,
you
but
read.
Yeah, I had some bad haircuts in those years, but yes, young, so cuter than I am now for sure. And that was my life. I was a party girl, and that was sort of my identity was as a party girl. As much as I did have an identity. And I lived like that for most of my adult life. And my drinking got sort of progressively bigger. It took up bigger and bigger space in my life. And at some point in my early mid-20s, I had this kind of realization that my drinking wasn't just like everybody else's drinking. I had a serious drinking problem. And I spent the next almost 15 years sort of struggling with that, with the knowledge that I had a drinking problem and I needed to do something about it. I would go to meetings, sometimes AA meetings. I would do these sort of cleanses. I would go to therapy. So I tried different things to control my drinking or quit drinking. And I was never able to do it long term. And I this had all sorts of repercussions, sort of downstream repercussions in my life. So it was really hard to keep a job when I was drinking as much as I was, because it's hard to go to work when you're hungover. And so as my friends from college started hitting these milestones, relationships and career-wise, I wasn't really hitting those. I was really kind of stuck at the bar, stuck in this arrested development. It was, I will say, pretty fun. That I did have that going for me. I was much more fun than I am now. But, a lot of people age out of this sort of problem drinking, and I never really did. And then I did get my shit together in various different ways. Like I got a career and a relationship sort of maybe later than I should have, but I did hit those milestones. And then COVID happened and my drinking really accelerated. So my wife, Jana, who you've met, she's a nurse, and she was gone a lot during COVID doing, what do we call them? Not first responders. What was that?
First line workers or something like that. So she was a nurse.
She was a nurse.
People
essential.
who matter. People who matter.
People who matter. Yes. Podcasters was
else.
Not on that list. I don't know why. We were definitely saving lives. So while Jana was off, yes, helping people, I was at home mostly scrolling on Twitter and drinking. And I did that to the point where it became really obvious that this was having really serious detrimental effects on my life. Physically, I was sick all the time. I felt terrible. I was, sort of bloated face. When I look back at pictures of myself from those years, I have the sort of permanent glassy eyed, I didn't look good. I didn't feel good. I was waking up every night at 3:00 in the morning, covered in sweat, either withdrawing from alcohol or just anxious about this life that I was living. And I never told Jana. I was very, very secretive about this.
Yeah, I want to pause for a second and talk about the being secret, because I think that's something that a lot of people experience, but by definition, they don't talk about it because they're secret.
Yeah.
So first of all, how much were you drinking at this point, and how were you managing to hide it?
Yeah. So when I tell people that Jana didn't know, a lot of people either don't believe me, or they think that Jana is incredibly gullible or not observant. And neither of those things is true. A lot of people hide their drinking. And at this point, I have talked to many, many alcoholics. And a lot of people don't use that term, but don't like that term, but I don't have a problem with it. So I've talked to a lot of people who have struggled with their own alcohol consumption. And there are certain themes that come up. There are things that you told yourself you would never do, and then you do them. One of them it could be drunk driving or drinking alone or drinking in the morning or whatever, drinking at work. But a big one is drinking in secret. A lot of people drink in secret, and a lot of people manage to hide that from their families, from their friends for a long time. It's not that hard to hide it if you are capable of this. I'm not talking about being stumbling down drunk. Right. So here's how much I was drinking. My routine during COVID was basically this. I would wake up in the morning. I would tell myself that today would be different. Today, I'm not going to drink. And then a few hours into my day, let's say 11 o'clock, noon, I would get a craving for alcohol. And by the time I had even I could even vocalize what was happening, I was out the door going to get booze. It was as though my body had a life of its own. My brain was saying, you're not going to do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. You don't want to do it. And my body was like, no, you need this right now. So I would go to the store. And I would go to different stores throughout my neighborhood, because that's another thing that people do. You don't, there's so much shame wrapped up in this.
The person working at the bodega is going to judge you because they're thinking about you all day.
Exactly. And in my case, the woman who owned the bodega was actually my neighbor. So I really wanted to avoid that place. So I would go to different stores to get my alcohol. And I would usually get a 6-pack of Tall Boys. So that's like 6 pints of cheap American lager. Here in Washington, I mostly drank like Rainier and Ham, sort of the local shitty beers. And I've always been I will drink anything, or I would drink anything, but that's always kind of been my thing. Was I liked sort of even like low alcohol beers because I could drink more of them. And what I liked is the act of drinking itself. I liked the way it made me feel, but I liked the act of picking something up.
The ritual
of it. Yeah. Best with a cigarette, best with 20 cigarettes, actually. And so I would come home and I would scroll some more, sit on my back deck. This is much more fun in the summer than in the winter. In the winter, I don't have any, I've never liked to drink inside. I only like to drink outside. And I don't have like a covered porch or really much of an overhang in my house. But there's like a maybe a 2 foot, like the house like overhangs the garage by like 2 feet maybe. And so I would stand under that. And I would drink.
You can't drink inside the house?
Drinking for me has always been really tied in with smoking cigarettes.
Okay.
And so I have never in my life, the number of times I have like drinking in my life without chain smoking is like less than 5.
Wow. Okay. So you weren't really a social drinker. This wasn't like at a dinner party
not
drinking
at this point.
okay.
Not by this point. Like their social aspect was completely off. Early in my life, yes. Although I always liked to drink alone. Like for even before I was 21, when I, had my first rental house at 19 in college, I loved to sit on my front porch and drink beer and read the New Yorker and chain smoke. I loved that when I was 19. Doesn't that sound good?
Amazing.
Yeah.
If we could only go back to that
Seriously.
time. Now you would have to drink in order to read the New Yorker, but
that's true. And also cigarettes are so expensive. I'd probably be juuling.
That's true.
But yeah, so I have always been I was always a solo drinker, but I had been a very social drinker for years of my life. But by this point, there was no social aspect. This was done, unless you count like tweeting angrily at people, unless there's some social aspect there. Okay. But to answer your question, my consumption during that period was about 6 pints a day between the hours of like around, let's say on average, like noon and 5 p.m. And sometimes I would drink more if there was like wine left in the house or some liquor left over from something. Sometimes I would drink more. Sometimes I would drink all of that and then go to the store to get more. Sometimes I would drink slightly less. But on average, I would say I was drinking like 6 pints within that span of a day, within my drinking hours. And my drinking hours crept up earlier and earlier the longer this went on. And then when I knew Jana was getting off of work, and she doesn't like work down the street. She works, an hour ferry ride from home. So it wasn't like she was ever just going to like pop back without me being aware. Plus we have these tracking devices in our pockets now. She shares her location. I know where she is at all times. She
can't see you going to the store?
She wouldn't be looking.
She wouldn't bother.
She wouldn't. Okay. I mean, she's not like, she's at work. She wasn't. And she also didn't suspect that I was like secretly going to the 7-Eleven. I'd go for walks. If she had seen me on a walk, she would have suspected I was on a walk. So she would, before she was coming home, I would clean up, go take a shower. I would take my empties and I would put the cigarette butts in the bottom of the empties and I would tie them up in a black plastic bag, the black plastic bag that I got from the store. When I see people carrying those bags now, I'm like, you have a problem. You need my book. I would put those in the bottom of the trash can. I wasn't recycling during this period. I wasn't. But
why?
Well, because I needed everything in the bag so I could hide it. Also, there were cigarette butts in my cans. And recycling is fake. That's the other thing. Recycling, not
because I have heard stories of people putting their stuff in like the neighbor's recycling or kind of evenly dispersing it throughout the block.
I would do that on occasion. But mostly I just put it in a plastic bag in the bottom of the like outdoor garbage can. Anyway, so, and then she would, when there was an hour or so before she was getting home, I take a shower, I clean up, I dispose of the evidence, running around the house, making sure I haven't left any scrap of evidence. And then I'm at home, the house is clean. I'm like doing whatever. When she comes home, it's COVID. She's had a long day. Life is stressful. She didn't know that I did this. So I did that for 2 years without telling her.
And you would not drink after she got home?
No. I've always been both very bad at rules, at internal rules. Like I was never able to tell myself, you're not drinking today, and then actually not drink today. But if my rule was you're not drinking when Jana's home, I could do that. And also, like, again, the smoking was a really big part of this, and I wasn't going to smoke around her. And if I started drinking around her, then I would want a cigarette. There were a couple, like just a very small, maybe 2 or 3 occasions when like she would go to bed and I would get up or like stay up late and drink at night. But for the most part, I was like a daytime drinker, a solo daytime drinker in secret.
And she had no idea that you were doing this? Did she think you just really didn't drink at all?
Yes.
And was your behavior any different? Like, were you able to sort of maintain a buzz for the rest of the evening after she got home?
No, my buzz would wear off, and, I would fall asleep on the couch watching TV, that's a fairly normal thing to do. She didn't know. I mean, she didn't know, and I was good at hiding it, and she had no reason to suspect that this was going on. Also, I smoke pot. I don't smoke pot very much anymore, but at the time I was a pot smoker. And so I was also smoking a lot of pot. And so I probably just seemed high.
Okay. And she knew about that.
Yeah.
Okay. In your mind at the time, did you feel like it was going to have to end at some point?
Yes.
Was it one of those feelings like, okay, well, at some point this will stop. I don't know when that's going to be, but the time will come.
I knew it had to end, because if it didn't, it was going to kill me. Like, it was going to literally kill me. And either I was going to get some sort of disease, alcohol-related disease, or something worse would happen. I knew this couldn't last forever, but I had been trying to quit drinking for 15 years and nothing had stuck. And so I decided to do something different. So I decided to take this drug called naltrexone. That's sort of the short version of the story. And this drug, it didn't require me to stop drinking. In fact, I could drink while on the drug. That was the appeal of the drug. I had read about it years before in an article in the Atlantic by Gabrielle Glasser. And the thing that was so different about this protocol, it's called the Sinclair method, is that you take this drug, naltrexone, this opioid blocker, and then you continue to drink while you're on the drug. And the opioid blocker works by basically blunting the pleasure that you get from alcohol. And so after 2 years of like living like this, drinking in secret, nobody knowing except for the woman down at the 7-Eleven, and then the one at the 7-Eleven down the street, the other one, and then the Citgo station. I realized I had to do something about it because I was so unhappy and so sick and so miserable. And I knew that this was killing me. And my options were, at that time, I thought, go to rehab. I called Hazelden Betty Ford. I got an estimate. They said, what you need to do is go to Minnesota for 28 days. That's going to be almost $30,000. And then you need to do 90 days of intensive outpatient therapy in Bellevue, which is an hour ferry ride and then another hour drive. So it just completely disruptive to my life. My full-time life would have been dedicated to getting sober for the next 4 months. Completely not possible. Do you hear that?
It's interesting that you thought about inpatient. So inpatient, was it that it was the last resort, or was that kind of extreme move somehow seemed more feasible than just going to AA again something like that?
So I tried AA. I was doing Zoom meetings. So this was also during COVID. I tried Zoom meetings to do AA. There were also when in-person meetings started to open back up. The ones that I was most interested in were the atheists and agnostics, which of course were at the Unitarian Church down the street from my house. Those never started back up in person after COVID. So I did go to a few meetings, but I had done AA enough times in the past to know that AA didn't address my root issue, and my root issue was that I like to drink. That was it. It wasn't trauma or anxiety or depression or anything in my past. It was that I was physically and mentally and emotionally addicted to alcohol. And AA, no matter how many meetings I went to, was never able to address the cravings. So that was the problem. And I also didn't want Janet to know. Right. So if I started going to, 90 meetings in 90 days, she's going to be like, where the fuck are you?
Well,
You're not
if
going
you
to
went
gym.
to inpatient in Minnesota,
right.
she would know.
Notice. So that's one of the reasons I was so hesitant to do these sort of traditional modes of recovery, was because I didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't want Janet to know. I didn't want my family to know. I didn't want anybody to know. And so this method that I found, the Sinclair method, taking this drug naltrexone and then drinking, these were sort of the benefits. I could do it alone in secret. Nobody would know. And I could keep drinking. And that, it sounds so crazy when I put it that way, because obviously I had a huge problem with drinking. Drinking was ruining my life. And yet I knew that I need, it's hard to describe, but my desire to drink was stronger than my desire for anything else in my life. I love Janet and Moose more than I love alcohol, of course. On paper, yes. But every day I was choosing to do something that was hurting me and hurting my family because I was addicted, And I have a lot of sympathy for people who've been through this with any kind of drug, because yes, you do love your family more. Of course you do. But the draw of a chemical addiction is so powerful that you stop making rational decisions.
So how did you get the naltrexone? What was it like to take it? Yeah. Tell us about that.
So I had actually gotten the naltrexone several years before. So I got it back when I was living in Seattle after I had read this article in The Atlantic. And the way that it was explained was that you take this drug, you continue to drink, and you basically lose the desire. It blocks the pleasure. It blocks naltrexone is an opioid blocker. So it blocks your body's natural opioids, which are endorphins. It blocks them from landing on opioid receptors and giving you this burst of euphoria that people often, not everybody feels that when they drink, but that's how I felt when I would drink. I would get high, almost like cocaine. Like alcohol has always energized me. And so naltrexone blocks that response. And so you can continue to drink and you can even continue to get drunk, but it's just not going to feel very good. And the way that this was explained in this article was that it's basically a very long, slow off ramp to sobriety if you want it to be. Or some people use it just to take control of their drinking. So if you go out, if like your problem is that you're drinking a bottle of wine a night, you can take this drug, and if it works for you, you'll drink a glass of wine instead of the whole bottle. And that's what really appealed to me, was this idea of, I don't have to quit cold turkey. I might not have to quit at all, but over time, if this drug works for me, I'm going to lose the desire to drink. It's not going to be like I'm going to AA and I'm facing my demons, but I still have this desire, and I just have to fight through it until someday, hopefully, the desire goes away.
Right. And you have a disease.
I have a disease.
If you go to AA, you are identified as having a disease.
Right. With this protocol, this would eliminate the desire entirely. And that's what I wanted. I wanted this out of my brain, because for years, I had lived with alcohol being the dominating force in my life. The best way I can explain this to people who have never been addicted to something is it's almost like new love, or like having a crush on somebody, a really intense crush where everything in your brain, you might be going to work, you might be talking to your family on the phone, you might be watching TV, but somewhere in the back of your brain, you're thinking about this person. And that's what it was like for me for fucking years. And not like a good new love, like the sort of like destructive love that is bad for you, but you can't stop thinking about it. That's what it was like. And I wanted that voice in my head to be gone. And so that's what I hope that this drug, naltrexone, would do. It would quiet that voice in my brain. So I got it. I had gotten it a couple years before. After I read this article, I went to my doctor. My doctor had never heard of the Sinclair method. And I should say there are different ways of taking naltrexone, but the specific one that I did, the Sinclair method, all it is basically is you take the pill, you wait an hour, and then you drink. So my doctor had heard of naltrexone, I believe, but she had never heard of the Sinclair method. The way that she and most doctors would recommend is you take the pill and then you don't drink. You take it and then you're abstinence. But that didn't appeal to me, because I wanted to continue drinking. So I took the pill. And I had bad side effects. I felt nauseous. I got a headache right away. I felt depressed. I felt shitty. And so I was like, all right, well, you know what? I hope this was going to be the thing. I hope this was going to be my miracle drug, and it's just not. And so I put it in my cabinet until COVID. So I had a stash of it, which made it a lot easier. I didn't have to go out.
It doesn't expire, obviously.
I think it has an expiration date, but it still worked.
Okay.
And then when I needed a refill, I went to my doctor and I just said, hey, can I get a refill? And I got one. And it's not hard to get. Like, most insurance covers it. It's a cheap generic drug. There are also, because of COVID, because of this rise of telemedicine, there are lots of services that specialize in naltrexone, and you can go and just do a Zoom appointment with a doctor and then get the prescription sent to you. So it's easier to get now than it was when I first got it.
So what do we know about like long-term effects? How safe is it?
It's extremely safe. So there's been over, I think, around 100 clinical trials of this drug. It's extremely safe. Some people get side effects. I did, and there are things that you can do to minimize them. So when I started the second time, and so a typical Dose is 50 milligrams. I started with 12.5 milligrams, so a quarter of a pill. Take it with a full stomach, take it with a full glass of water. Some people microdose before they, like you'll take it, take just like a small amount for a few days before you start sort of to work it into your body. Some people get no side effects at all and it still works for them, but it's extremely safe. You can overdose on Tylenol, on aspirin, on lots of over-the-counter drugs. They do not know how much it would take to like kill somebody on this drug. Extremely safe.
Okay. So how did it start to work? What did it feel like?
So the first day I took it and I, waited my hour. That's the minimum waiting period. It's how long it takes it to metabolize into your system. And I started drinking like normal. And the first day I drank as much as I did every other day. And it felt like slightly dulled. It made the fourth and the fifth beer less compelling. I've heard it described, sort of metaphors are the best way to kind of explain this. I've heard it described as like eating 4-day-old cake or riding a bike with a flat tire or drinking with a condom on. So you're still doing the thing. You're still drinking. You can even get drunk. You just don't get buzzed, right? You don't get the euphoric effect, the thing that makes you really talkative and joyous. You don't get that, but you can still get drunk. So you don't want to like take this and then drink and then drive a car. You don't want to do any of that shit. It's just less fun. That's kind of the best way to explain it. It's just not as fun as drinking without it. You don't get the endorphin rush, but you do get the body high. So, which actually isn't that fun, I learned when it comes to alcohol. So like the slurred speech and feeling uncoordinated, you get kind of that, but you don't get the mental, I don't know, sort of the mental euphoria.
So how is it that you weren't craving that euphoria to the point where you stopped taking the drug and just kept drinking?
This was my last option before I had to come clean and tell my wife and tell my family and go do make some serious lifestyle changes. So I was just really serious about it. And this can be a problem with the drug is compliance. People miss that euphoria. I've interviewed now a lot of people who have done this. And by the time someone has sought out this medication, usually alcohol is such a burden on them that they just want to be free of this. They want the monkey off of their back. And so you are willing to do what it takes to get that done. But compliance is a problem. And because of that, there are certain populations that this is going to work better for. People who are highly motivated, people who have social support, who have a job. I talk to clinicians who work with populations that are basically, a lot of homeless people. Can we say homeless on this, or is it unhoused?
You can say homeless.
Okay.
And I was actually going to make a homeless joke about 15 minutes ago when you were talking about how you only drank outside. And I was thinking you would be a very good homeless person.
An unhoused person, but
you would succeed. You'd achieve success there.
I would.
Yeah, you can. Okay, so homeless people, this is not, they can't comply, I would imagine.
It's not, it's not about whether or not you have a place to live. It's about what your motivation is and your reliability and your willpower. And I'm not a person with a strong willpower. I'm just not. Like, I don't, I go to the gym for literally 10 minutes. I'm not a great willpower person, but I sucked my thumb till I was 9. It's always been hard for me to quit shit. But taking a pill and drinking, I knew from prior experience that taking a pill and having a beer was going to be a lot easier than going to AA every day or going to rehab or trying to muscle my way through this or doing whatever other sort of treatment there was. This was going to be the easiest, least painful way possible. And so for me, this was 100% worth it. If it got me to what I wanted, which was freedom from this mental burden that I had lived with for so much of my life.
So how long did it take to finally free yourself?
Yeah. So the term is extinction. And this is a term in psychology that basically means unlearning a behavior. Because this is with a drug, it's called pharmacological extinction. But I would say the mental state is one of freedom, right? Where you stop desiring whatever the thing is that you were trying to do. it took me, so I took naltrexone for 7 months, and gradually over time, one thing that you should do on the Sinclair method is track your drinks. So I did that. I had a chart with peaks and valleys. It's not a linear process. It wasn't like I drank six drinks on day 1 and 5 drinks on day 2 and 4. That's just not how it works. There's lots of peaks and valleys. But gradually over time, I started pushing back my start time. So instead of starting to drink at noon, I would start to drink at 1 or 2. And then later I started incorporating more alcohol-free days into my week. And alcohol-free days are also days when I wasn't taking naltrexone. So some doctors will tell people to take naltrexone every day, at the same time every day. And that does work for some people. But under the Sinclair method, you only take it when you plan on drinking. You only take it in anticipation of drinking. And so on days when you're not drinking, when you're not taking the drugs, your endorphin receptor, your opioid receptors are unblocked. You have like an adequate supply of endorphins in your brain. So you're supposed to do things on those days that sort of naturally bring you pleasure, going for a hike, playing with your dog, having conversation, eating good food, whatever. And so I started gradually incorporating more alcohol-free days into my week, which I had never done. But like I wasn't drinking when Jana was off work. I wasn't drinking just like on days when she was at home. So I already had alcohol-free days every week. But on my own, by myself, when I'm just at home and I don't have anyone watching me, I had never had alcohol-free days, but I started incorporating those. And it was surprisingly easy. I thought it was going to be really hard, but it was surprisingly easy. And then over time, I just drank less and less. And so after about 7 months on the drug, I decided to have my first alcohol-free month. And it was honestly not that hard. There on the like rare occasion what I would think like, I want to drink right now. I would think, well, then I'd have to take the pill. I have to put my shoes on and go down to the store. I have to take the pill. And I don't really like the way the pill makes me feel. And it's not gonna be that much fun anyway. So I'm just not going to do it. It was as though my brain, the part of my brain that was able to make rational decisions had woken up from an extremely long nap. And so the 30 days came and went, and I just never started drinking again. And so I declared extinction after 9 months when what happened was that it was right around the holidays, and Jana invited me to go to a party. And since I used to love parties, I used to be sort of life of the party kind of girl. But as I have gotten older and grumpier, parties have become much less fun for me. And so parties in general, just not something I particularly enjoy at this point. But she was going to a party at a coworker's house, and I could either, go with her to this party sober or stay home and drink alone. And I didn't want to stay home and drink alone. I didn't want to drink. I would rather go to this party at my wife's coworker's house sober than stay home. And that's when I was like, okay, you have officially reached extinction. So I actually quit drinking it within 7 months, but I called it at 9. Okay. And I've been sober ever since.
And Jana still had no idea that you were doing this and taking this pill?
No idea. So I didn't tell. I wanted a year of sobriety, of full sobriety, before I told her. And then a year came and went, and I didn't tell her because it just stopped being a part of my life. And I think that's what's so different about this protocol than something like AA or other 12-step programs or anything that takes long-term focus. Is like, once I was done with this, I stopped thinking about alcohol. I just stopped. I didn't crave it. I didn't want it. It just didn't occur to me. It just stopped being a part of my life. And that's what I want. That's what I wanted. That's why I started this process. I wanted freedom from that psychological burden. And so it was really easy not to tell her because it had stopped being a part of my life. And then we bought this house in North Carolina, and we moved across the country, not full time, but we bought a house there. And so we were spending like half the year there. And when we actually bought the house in Asheville. So the town where I went to college, the town where I really started drinking, some of my best drinking years were done in that town. And when we got back there, I knew I needed to do something to meet people. Most of my friends had long since left. It's been 20 years since I lived there. And the ones who are still there, honestly, probably don't have great impressions of me from the old days. And so I started going to AA meetings, and I went just because some great storytellers there. It's like an open mic situation oftentimes. And I just, at this point I was actually sober, and I thought maybe I'll get something out of this. Maybe I'll enjoy it. I'll be in the company of sober people who understand what I went through, even if our ways of getting to sobriety were different, people who understand what addiction is like. And I started going to these meetings, and what I saw over and over again, I mean, sometimes there were great uplifting stories, but oftentimes I would leave these meetings kind of depressed because I would hear these shares from people who had been sober for months or even years. And not only were they still going to AA every day, it was a huge part of their life, they were still struggling with the desire to drink. They were having cravings. They were having to fight it. They were on the phone with their sponsor all day. It was still getting in the way of their lives. And that wasn't my experience at all. I was free. I was done. It was almost as though I had never started drinking in the first place in terms of the amount that I thought of alcohol. I just never thought about it. But I was going to these meetings and I was seeing this over and over again. I'd see the same thing, someone been sober for a year, something happens, or maybe nothing happens. There's a trigger or there's no trigger at all. And they're drinking again, or they're actively fighting the desire to drink. And I just felt like I needed to tell her. And there was some other shit happen. Some loved ones were having like health effects because of drinking. And I told her. She was surprised. We're still married, by the way.
Did she feel betrayed that you had kept this from her?
No. Jana is a remarkable person. Very much out of my league, physically and morally. No, she wasn't betrayed. She wasn't mad. She was sad for me that I had gone through this alone. But she was also proud of me for coming out the other side and for doing it on my own and for taking care of business. She was surprised. I mean, she was shocked for sure, but she was never mad. And I was never afraid of telling her because I thought she was going to leave me or this was going to have some like lasting damage on our relationship. I didn't want to tell her because I was ashamed.
When did you decide that you were going to write a book about this?
So after I told Jana, I had told a very, very small number of people I was doing this when I was doing it. One of those was Andy Mills. And the reason I told Andy was because...
Tell us who Andy Mills is, even though many people know, but...
Yeah, Andy. So Andy's a radio producer. He's a longtime producer at national or like in public radio. He started the Daily, and now he's doing his own thing. He's got his own company. But years ago, like 9 or 10 years ago, he did his episode on Radiolab. He read that same article as me in The Atlantic, and he did a show for Radiolab about naltrexone and the Sinclair method. And so I told Andy what I was doing because I knew Andy would understand. And Andy was making a new show. It's called Reflector. And he wanted his first episode to be about the Sinclair method and about naltrexone and about why we as a country treat alcohol like we do as this sort of moral failing, rather than something to be treated with medication. And so when Andy decided he wanted to do that episode, he asked me if I could help him like find some people to be on tape with him. And he knew that this was sort of anonymous. And, my reasons for deciding, so I decided to be Andy's voice for the show. I decided to do that podcast for him. And partly my motivation was selfish. Partly I felt like someone else is going to do this and I'm going to be fucking jealous. Like I've lived through this too. I've written about this. I had been keeping a secret Substack while I was doing this. Published
a secret Substack about naltrexone?
Yes, while I was doing it. Because I was trying to be clinical about it, right? And there's lots of resources out there about this, but they're kind of scattered. So you can watch 10 hours of YouTube or listen to podcasts or spend 50 hours on Facebook pages on Reddit trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. And, getting people's tips and tricks, because this is one of these rare cases where you can genuinely get better information from the internet than from your own clinician, unless you have an exceptional clinician.
Increasingly not rare, sadly, right. But okay. Were you writing on the Substack? Were other people contributing?
No, it was just me. I had very few readers. I published under the name Teddy Kennedy. That's not taken, I assume. because I had put TK, which is, for your listeners, this is a term in journalism that means to come, basically. So
to be filled in later.
Yes,
information to be found at a
distant
future time.
Right. And you put that when you don't know. It's like a placeholder, basically.
It was a TK day. That was always the classic magazine lead, if you were too lazy.
Yes.
Hand it into your editor. It was a TK day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I was using that for my own shorthand, TK, and then Teddy Kennedy. So I was writing a Substack under that. It's now offline. Nobody tried to find it. It can no longer be found. But I was doing that because I wanted to catalog the process both for myself and for other people, because there was lots of places to get sort of visual information, audible information, but I wanted something that was easy, like this is what to expect on day 1, this is what to expect on month 1, etc. And there is a book that was written about this by a guy named Roy Escapa called The Cure, but he's a clinician. He wasn't a patient. So there's plenty about the science of the drug, but there's not that much about sort of practical tips and tricks and what to expect. So I was writing a Substack. So when Andy said this, I was just when Andy said he was going to do the show, I was like, I don't want to cede this territory to somebody else. I'm claiming this for myself. And then I did a show, but I didn't use my name. I knew that plenty of people would realize it was me because there's a lot of overlap between Andy's audience and my audience. And then, so that was kind of my soft coming out. I didn't use my last name, but my voice was out there. And then, this is so embarrassing, but the truth is I decided to write the book because I had a dream about it. And I can't remember what happened in the dream, but I woke, and the dream was like, it was like the podcast had gone out, and it was like I had like one thing left, or I was going to have to go beg for a job at Whole Foods and they wouldn't take me back. In
the dream, the podcast was over.
Yes,
and you had no money.
Yes, yes.
Oh, wow.
In the dream,
I wonder how
like,
common this is for podcasters.
This is like the podcaster's version of like dreaming that you've gone to class without wearing your clothes or studying for the test.
Yes, or you didn't take the test all those years later.
Exactly.
Right.
You realize you've been enrolled in school all semester and you just forgot about it. So I had that dream. And I woke up the next day and I was like, all right, I got to write the book. And I sat down. Jana, I think she had to work that day. And I sat down and I started writing. And by the time she came back, I had a packet. So I had written about this. I had these Substack essays, but I had 15,000 words ready to send to my agent that day. And I sent it to my agent, and he was like, "I can't help you. I can't help you with this."
Why? What was he wanting from you? Was he waiting for something else?
So when it comes to, first of all, this sounds crazy. It's not like, it sounds like I'm telling you can cure diabetes with donuts. What I'm telling you goes against 100 years of messaging about treatments for alcohol abuse, which is the only path forward once someone has crossed that invisible line from normal drinker to alcoholic, is to never drink again. That's the lesson most of us have absorbed. This is changing. In recent years, there's been more of an emphasis on things like harm reduction, but predominantly in the culture, that's been the message forward. And so I think to him, it probably sounded a little nuts. It was probably a little manic. I like email him one day out of the blue and I'm like, I wrote 15,000 words yesterday. Can you sell this for me? So maybe thought I was having an episode. But the other thing is that self-help is usually published by the person who has developed the method themselves, right? The guy who developed this method is dead. His name was John David Sinclair. He's been dead for, at this point, over 10 years. I can't remember when he died, but he's dead. So he can't write this book, right? So that's a hard sell. I'm selling someone else. I'm writing about someone else's protocol. And I'm trying to do it from this like journalistic angle that's also part memoir, but also self-help. So I think it was a hard sell. So after he said no, I went to a publisher who, so I mentioned that Roy Escapa book, The Cure. I looked at who his publisher was, and they had published another book they had published a memoir by Claudia Christian. She's an actress who was most famous for Babylon 5. And she's like the patron saint of the Sinclair method. She did this TED Talk 15 years ago about this that's been viewed millions of times. And she has brought more people to the Sinclair method than anybody else. So she wrote a memoir. And this one publisher, Ben Bella, it's based in Dallas, an independent publisher, they published both those books. So I went to their website and they have the form that every publisher has where you send in your pitch, a few sentences about your pitch, and they look at it and they delete it immediately. That's how this normally works.
Hopefully, rather than giving it to somebody else, but yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I heard back from the publisher the next day and we had a meeting and I signed a contract within a week. I didn't use it. I think I sent you the contract. It just is already red flags here. Took it back to my agent and said, hey, I got a contract. Will you look at this? And he said, basically, if I look at this, we're going to have to reopen. We're going to have to shop this around to other publishing houses. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to write a proposal. I wanted a publishing house that knew what I was trying to do. And I found the one that, like, the words, the Sinclair method, didn't make them have sort of a quizzical look. So that's what happened.
Was your drive to do with wanting to get the message out? I mean, is this like, you really feel strongly about this? You want people to know about this? This is not some kind of career advancement. I mean, maybe it is, but this is off brand. We should say.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, part of it was selfish, that I knew that eventually someone was going to write this book and I wanted it to be me. So that was part of it. But a big part of it was that I want people to know about this because I have seen the damage that alcohol does to people. In my life, in many of my friends' lives, I came up around drinkers. I'm not Gen X. I'm not in that generation where people don't drink and have sex. My generation.
Wait. No. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I think
Gen
you mean
Z.
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Yeah. Gen X. We wrote the book on drinking and having sex.
Millennials too. We drink and we fuck.
Getting pregnant. Going to abortion clinics. Drinking some more. Smoking in the car on the way home.
Yes. So I just wanted people to know that there are other options out there. And so that's the big message of the book. It's about naltrexone. It's about the Sinclair method. But bigger than that, I want people to realize that there's not one path out of alcohol use disorder. There are many paths. And this one might not work for you. It might not. There's absolutely no guarantees that it can work for any one person. But there is not one path forward. And I think culturally many of us have absorbed the message that if you have a drinking problem, there is one path out. And that's just not true. So yes, I actually did have sort of I do have one beneficent, bone in my body, and I wanted to help people.
I want to talk about the recovery space, the recovery options. We mentioned AA. There's also this whole sober curious movement that has come up over the last probably 10 years or so.
Yeah.
There's something called, is it moderation management?
That's been around for a long time.
Yeah, that's been around for longer. There's a lot of, the wellness space online incorporates a lot of sobriety, and it's kind of all the rage. People don't drink nearly as much as they used to.
Yeah.
There's California sober, which of course you smoke pot and do drugs, but you just don't drink. So there's all these options, but AA remains the default. If you get arrested or something, you get sent to AA. Drug courts send people to AA. And, my understanding and some of my observations is that AA, they get pretty defensive. They don't like it when people suggest alternatives.
Well, I think
I wonder if you have run up against that.
Yeah. So AA's official like company response is we don't take outside positions on anything.
Right.
So if you write AA and you say, I'm a journalist and I'm working on a story about the sober curious movement, what's your position on that? And they'll say, we don't take positions on that. And every meeting in every community is different. And there are some that are very open-minded, and there are some that are extremely dogmatic and closed-minded. And the same is true of Sinclair method communities. Some of them can also be very dogmatic and closed-minded. And so I think it really depends on the AA community that you find yourself. So there are some AA communities where people take fucking ketamine, and that's fine. And there are some where if you tell your sponsor that you're taking SSRIs, your sponsor's gonna fire you or scold you. So So I think it's such a huge program and so varied that I think making any kind of generalization is tough. But I do think people within the program, and I've encountered this myself, there can definitely be judgment about this particular mode, not only because it doesn't require abstinence. You can drink. In fact, that's part of it. That's part of the recipe. You drink. That's extremely different.
Right.
I think that can be sort of threatening, and it can look crazy to people who have been told and who believe that any one drink, that once you're an alcoholic, any drink is going to send you back into the spiral of addiction. And then the other thing is, I think there can be some judgment because this method doesn't require this sort of deep internal searching and reclamation and amends making. And there's not, like, you can do the self-work if you want to, but you don't have to. And my response to that is, for one, if you've hurt people, and most alcoholics have hurt people, it's a lot easier to make amends, to get your shit together, to be a better employee, a better parent, a better spouse, or whatever, if you don't have that the monkey on your back. If you are free from the desire itself to drink, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with the other shit. Whether that's making amends or being a better person, it's going to be easier if you're not actively drinking, or if you're drinking in a way that is controlled. And the other thing I have to say about this is, I think it is a myth, and a bit of a pernicious one, that there is something at the root of everyone's drinking that makes them drink. There's this idea that you have to get to the root of your problem, and the root of your problem is trauma. It's depression, it's anxiety, it's your mother, it's your father, it's your bad relationship,
or just the way you're wired.
Just the way that's the thing. I think my root is the way that I'm wired.
But AA will also say, like, you were born with this disease, kind of thing.
I think I was in some way. I know that I have a genetic predisposition for I'm fucking Irish Catholic. I come from, like, look at me. I look like an alcoholic. I look like I was born an alcoholic. I do have that genetic lineage, that history, but if I had never started drinking in the first place, I wouldn't be an alcoholic, right? So it's not just the way that you're born. It's three factors, or this is my understanding of it. There's three factors. There's genetic propensity, there's exposure, repeated exposure, and there's the age at which you started. So those are three risk factors. Trauma is another risk factor, but I don't have that. But I do have those other three risk factors. I started drinking really young, I did it a lot, and I have some genetic propensity towards alcohol addiction. And that's why I developed an addiction, because I did it enough times that I got addicted.
What year did you actually get sober? When was your last drink?
What year is it now? It's 2025 now. So I got sober in 2022.
Okay. So you were doing your extraordinarily successful podcast during this time when you were heavily drinking. Blocked and Reported started in 2020. Mm-hmm. And I do want to talk about that podcast, and I want to kind of shift and talk about this sort of larger media ecosystem. But, that was very successful very quickly. You were working really hard. Your life changed pretty dramatically in a short period of time in 2020. How are you managing to do all that while drinking so heavily?
I wasn't working that hard. The beginning of the show was much more sort of organic, and we were talking about just like what was happening in the news, and so much was happening with BLM and the culture war stuff that there was no end of shit to talk to. So in the beginning, if you go back and listen to those early episodes, our preparation for those first episodes would be a page of some, like, here's a link, and then mostly it was us just talking. And now it is still just us talking, but now the prep that we do on the front end is so much greater. Every episode, we have a researcher now. She does an immense amount of prep, and then we do an immense amount of prep, or I do. Jesse doesn't do shit for shit. I spend a lot of time working on every episode now. In the beginning, I didn't. And it did impact the show in certain ways. So like I wouldn't record. I was very inflexible about things like recording times because I was going to start drinking at noon. So we needed to record at 10. I was not going to record later than that. And Jesse,
you were on the West Coast, fortunately.
I had it. Yes. So, but still, Jesse is, as you can imagine, a late riser. And so I was inflexible about things like that, and it didn't really get in the way, to be honest with you. I mean, I had also gone from having a full-time job where I'm working 40, 50 hours a week, plus commuting to Seattle. That did get in the way of my drinking when I had a staff job at a newspaper, to go from a full-time job where I had multiple deadlines a day to doing this podcast once or twice a week was a real step down in terms of the amount of labor. So the podcast, so like COVID and the podcast gave me a lot of time. Now I do work a lot more now than I did when I was drinking. And part of that is because the show has changed. Now we're doing more stories where we're like learning a lot, doing a deep dive into an issue, and then writing 20 pages of notes and then coming up with a storyline. Like it's just a lot more prep, but I also have a lot more time. And because I enjoy the work, I work basically full time now, just on the show. And I definitely was not doing that at the beginning. In the beginning, like I was working maybe 10 hours a week.
So why did you change the format? Did you think you had to, or was this just your natural work ethic?
It happened really organically. We never talked about it. It's just the notes kept getting longer and longer and the stories started getting different. And we got a researcher. First it was Trace. And so he was bringing us stories that we weren't familiar with. So at first we're talking about what's going on in the news. We're talking about the same thing that everybody else, all of our like sister shows are talking about. We're talking about the same stuff. And then when Trace joined, he broadened our sort of aperture. So now we're talking about these like internet communities that we're not aware of, we're not subject matter experts on. And so to talk competently about an issue or a story when you yourself are fairly fresh to it, it requires a lot of learning and a lot of prep on the front end. And I think that, so it happened really organically. It will surprise nobody to hear that Jesse and I have had basically no conversations about strategy or the future, or we just got a calendar last year. We were like, let's write down what we're going to do next week. And it has been, hey, start a calendar. I highly recommend writing shit down. It's actually a spreadsheet. It's not like an actual calendar.
Oh, wow. I'm spreadsheet phobic.
Oh, it works really well for us. So it all happened like just sort of over time, but I think it's partly why this show has done as well as it has, because we're not going to be the best at talking off the cuff about whatever's going on in politics. I'm just not that good at it. And I've done panel shows before. I don't like doing them because I don't like doing a crash course on like fucking Ukraine and then coming up with an opinion about it.
No, it's like taking a current events test in front of the whole world. That is a nightmare. That is like a back to school nightmare.
And some people are great at that.
Yeah.
I did a pilot for a panel show with Eli Lake and Batya Ungar-Sargon. This never aired because of me. Right? Because they're talking about fucking Ukraine. And I'm like, where is it on a map? You know what I mean? Like, I was
I can't even imagine that. You were like sandwiched between the two of them.
Yes.
Oh,
it was a total nightmare.
I'd pay to see that.
No, I think this has been deleted from whatever server it was on. They can do that. Even, regardless of how I feel about their particular opinions on the matter, they can do that. Michael Moynihan can talk. He can sit down and he can talk about fucking anything for an hour. That's not me. And I know that about myself. That's a limitation I have. And so what I can do is learn a lot about something that is really fucking dumb and esoteric, some little internet community that hasn't gotten a lot of attention outside of its community, and learn about that and bring people stories from that world. And I think that's why the show has done as well as it has, because we have left that realm of like, I mean, we will talk about Cracker Barrel or whatever, whatever Chris Rufo is trying to cancel today. We will talk about these things that are within our wheelhouse, and we'll talk about, fundamentally, this is a show about free speech. We will talk about that stuff. And so much of politics now intersects with that it's impossible not to talk about things like Trump. But what I like to do is to find stories that are being talked about online within their communities and aren't being talked about within the wider internet or our listenership, and bring people news stories. So I think that's kind of been the key to the success, but we didn't start out thinking about that. We were just like, whatever, let's just talk.
How are you feeling about the world of podcasting and podcasting as a career in general? I mean, you guys are exceptional, but the market is totally saturated.
Yeah.
Substack is great in a lot of ways, but it has very recently, had a huge influx of very hot, very big accounts coming in. And I don't know, the future seems very unclear to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's stressful. It's for sure stressful. I think I'm going to be fine. And I think I'm in the minority. And I'm really lucky because, especially with AI, these sort of writing jobs that I had before the podcast, those jobs can be replaced by AI.
AI? Why isn't there an AIAA
There should
meeting
be.
You could go to?
There probably is.
I think they all are. All this time they have actually been AI.
So, but what people like you and I have, and this takes time and effort to build up, is the trust of an audience. And so people want to hear your opinions, or they want to hear my opinions. They don't want to hear the opinions of a bot in the voice of Meghan Daum. And I think if I were starting out now, if I were 25 instead of in my 40s, I think I'd be much more screwed. I'm like, so there's that element of it. It's those like entry level jobs where you're just kind of writing news hits and working your way through a newsroom.
Yeah.
Those jobs are going to be rare and rarer. And like everything else in this, in the economy, there's going to be a small number of winners and a large number of losers. The Substack thing had, like, when in 2020, it felt so flush. I told people, quit your job, come join us. Freedom.
I remember you told me, I remember when I started the podcast and you were like, oh, it's going to come rushing in. And I was like, it's not, I don't think it is. This is very particular kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so our show, I mean, we're still doing well, but we don't see growth the way that we did in the past. And I think that's kind of across the board.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are some people, Derek Thompson just joined Substack. He's probably seeing growth at this point. People who already had big names are probably still, but there are some Substackers who've written really frankly about this. Freddie DeBoer has talked about he's flatlined. He might be a little bit on the decline. We have definitely seen less growth over the past year. A year and change, and then the election happened. It's definitely been much slower after like the first 4 years were like very steady growth. It's definitely.
And how are you feeling about like the culture warriors? I mean, there's a lot of people that like I had on my show very early, and you had on your show, kind of like the crowd we were hanging out with. People whose work I thought was really interesting. I'm not going to name names. Maybe you can if you want. But, I've watched a lot of them go not just off the rails, but into like outer space.
I think this was always inevitable. And I think that maybe we were foolish not to have seen that early on. The wider ecosystem has for sure cracked up in a lot of ways. The election, Gaza, things have gotten a lot more complicated. It felt like we had a common goal and a common enemy for years, and that has disappeared. And then at the same time, the ascent of the woke right has really clarified things for me. The same way that Twitter made me more conservative, X is making me more liberal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I am curious as to see what's going to happen, because this shit's all a trend, and this is not going to be a permanent state of affairs, right? What's happening now. I do think, in terms of actual like realigning of political maps, it seems like Republicans have such an advantage right now, especially as they are literally rewriting congressional maps, that we could be in for a long haul of conservative domination at a political level. And that concerns me for other reasons. And I'm curious as how the culture will follow, if there will be a bigger resurgence from the left, because I thought, I was wrong about this. I thought Trump winning, I didn't vote for Trump. I voted for Harris, but I thought Trump was going to win. Jesse and I bet. He actually did pay me. But I thought this was going to lead to a real resurgence of like resistance liberalism.
Resistance.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that hasn't happened. And I think I'm totally speculating here, but I think part of that is because so many people left Twitter. And so the resistance is happening in places like Blue Sky, where it might as well not be happening at all because it doesn't fucking matter. Nobody cares about that place. No, like a Blue Sky cancellation. If a Blue Sky, cancellation happens in the woods, does anybody hear it? No. The answer is no.
Are you on Blue Sky?
No. I will search. I have an account, like a burner account, so I can search it. But no, I've never skated.
I have an account, and I think I follow one person, and I don't go on there. I'm afraid it's like a hot stove. Like I'm going to burn myself if I dared to search my name or something. I think it would be very ugly.
It's good to look in on it because it's a little bit of a time capsule. We'll remind you of what Twitter was like, until basically Elon bought it. But I think that it's been very clarifying to see what happens when the free speech guardrails are off. Not that Donald Trump is actually a good faith operator when it comes to free speech. The things that he has done on a federal level are absolutely shameful in terms of cracking down on universities. I saw something today. I haven't looked deeply into this, but there was something today. 10-year prison sentence for people who burn American flags. It is so illiberal.
Oh, it was 10 years? I thought it was just, I guess a while ago, he said something like, if you burn a flag, it should be 1 year in jail, automatic.
Okay, maybe it was that.
Not just automatically, it was automatic.
Automatic, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't look, I saw a tweet about it. I didn't actually look into it.
Maybe he,
but shit like that, which is so liberal. And I am curious, like, so, what the right operators like Chris Rufo, what they figured out is that illiberalism is extremely unpopular. People do not like to be told what they can say and what they can do. And he capitalized on that. He's doing the same shit right now. And I'm really curious about that, the thinking behind that. Because do you think that it's going that like once the politics have shifted, but the tactics are the same people?
I just think they're undisciplined. I mean, I think it's like, screw you. We're gonna turn the tables on you. Yeah. And I just think it's glee. I think they're enjoying themselves so much. Every single thing is about owning the libs.
And the thing
is that this is why I was yelling at the left 10 years ago. I said, you guys are handing it to your adversaries, and they are going to take this and run with it and then turn it on you.
Yes.
Lead by example. You were winning.
One of my biggest dog piles on Twitter was saying that I was concerned that calling people racist and Nazis, like with abandon, was going to lead to a resurgence of white identitarianism. That is what happened.
Exactly.
This is one of the rare occasions where I actually just deleted a tweet because the noise was so loud coming from leftists, basically accusing me of being a racist. I was fucking right about that.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I was right about, it's like, I'm criticizing feminism because I'm actually more feminist than you. I care more than you.
Right.
It was just such a concept that people could not get their
minds around. American politics is the politics of backlash, right? And I don't know what's going to happen next because I was sort of wrong about the resistance on this one. And I'm concerned. It has not even been a year since Trump has been in office. It feels like forever.
I know.
Forever. And then, and I think we have lost some listeners over Trump stuff because people don't like it when we talk about him. But honestly, sometimes you got to talk about the dude who's in charge of the dude. Like, so much of the presidency and what's happening in DC is like blocked and reported content. Fucking covering up the Black Lives Matter plaza. Like, if this came from the woke left, we would have talked about it, And we do actually have values, and we try to be consistent. And just because something is there's some threat to a liberalism from the right instead of the left, that doesn't make it less of a threat. It makes it actually more of a threat because they have political power and they actually know how to wield it.
Right. And although others would say they have political power, but they don't have cultural power. And, culture, rock,
downstream
rock
culture.
covers, paper covers rock. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what do you, what do you want people to take away from this book, other than knowing that they have this option if they're struggling with drinking? I mean, are you hoping that this will sort of enter the sober conversation more than it is currently part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that's been hard about this is not my world at all. Like, you probably know more sober influencers than I do. And I'm really not a part of that world. I'm not in the wellness world. I'm not in the self-care world. I judge that shit, and this is a real pivot for me. It's like, this book is like completely apolitical. And it's apolitical for a reason. I want this to have a broad appeal. I want who you vote for to not matter at all when it comes to your response, or who I vote for to not matter at all when it comes to the response to this book.
Yeah, actually, that must have been a relief. This is totally apolitical. It doesn't have to do with politics.
It was a relief, but oddly, it has been harder to sell, I think, because of that.
Right. Sadly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had really unrealistic expectations about kind of the media response to this. I thought, like, I'm gonna like announce this book, and I'm gonna be fucking flying up to New York and LA to do press. And I don't want to, but I will do it. I don't want to. I don't want to get a haircut, but I will do it because this is going to save so many lives. I had these like very unrealistic expectations because what I'm selling is such a drink your way sober, man. I mean, it's like, for people with a drinking problem who have been unable to get sober other ways, to me, this is such a no-brainer, and there's so much appeal here. You can take control of your drinking without having to quit. It does sound crazy, but also like a miracle. And it has been really hard to get attention for this book. So basically, I'm like doing the rounds of like our friends' shows and some like very minor podcasts that you have not heard of. And that's kind of it at this point. Like, the bookings are not flying off the shelves, and even outlets that I think would have me on or promote me if I wrote a book about trans shit are not interested in this, which I find a little disappointing because I'm writing about a treatment, a like very simple, cheap, and easy treatment for a problem that kills 175,000 Americans every year and affects 1 in 10 Americans. And it is easier for me to get attention for, like, if I want to talk about Leah Thomas than it is.
You should have just put Leah Thomas on the cover.
Yeah,
just
I should have.
Apropos of nothing.
Should have dedicated it to her.
Or you could have called it like, trans your way sober.
that would have sold.
Okay. Well, look, we're recording this on August 26th. The book doesn't come out for a month.
That's true.
So people are going to be listening to this.
I did cancel my book tour, so
people are going to be listening to this on your pub week, which is when I'm going to run it, and who knows? By then you'll be on a billboard.
Yeah,
I did
Boulevard. When I had my first meeting with my publicist, who's a publicist who works at the publishing house, I, in all seriousness, said, we were talking about ways we could publish, and I said, what about a Times Square billboard?
Those are cheaper than you think, actually.
That's what I thought. And she said, what about queer media? And I said, you have not Googled me, have you? This is going to be an interesting relationship.
Don't rule anything out. Yeah. Well, Katie, thank you so much. Congratulations on this. And it's always great to talk. So we'll do it again.
Thanks, Meghan. Good to see you.
That was my conversation with journalist and podcaster Katie Herzog. Her new book is Drink Your Way Sober, and she is, of course, the co-host of the blockbuster podcast, Blocked and Reported. What else do you need to know? We've got our Unspeakeasy big weekend coming up, October 11th and 12th. It is waitlist only at this point. So if you want to You want to get on the wait list, you're welcome to. Anything's possible. Go to theunspeakeasy.com/NYC to do that. And I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. Thanks for listening. See you then. Thank you.